Good afternoon, guys. I hope you're doing well. I'm doing this video today for a couple of different reasons. First, I wanted to try recording a video on my phone instead of using the laptop. I know the live stream worked alright last week, but I wanted to do something maybe a little different and a little higher quality as far as the quality of the video. Also, the live stream was kind of awkward for me. The computer the entire time had a picture of what I was doing about 15 seconds ago in the past, and it was very, very distracting for me. So I wanted to do something different. I thought I'd try recording it this time and seeing how that all goes. So that's part of the reason for this video, to test out what does recording look like. The other part is, I was asked the other day by a parent if I could maybe talk about why everybody's reacting the way they are to the coronavirus, what the big deal is, because I know a lot of you guys may not understand or get what the fuss is all about, and I get that too. For a while, I really didn't understand what all the fuss was, why we were going out of our way to quarantine and to do all the stuff that the government has done. So I did a little digging, did a little research, and figured out, okay, what's going on and why are people reacting the way they are. And so I thought I'd share with you guys what's the big deal, what's all the concern about the coronavirus about, why is everybody freaking out. And there are kind of three things I want to cover in the next few minutes. I'm going to try to keep this video short. My hope is 10 minutes, but we'll see. Three things I want to cover. The first one being, what is the disease itself? Why is this disease so scary to the media, to the government? The second, why is the government responding the way they are? And third, what should our response be? How should we as Christians, as Bible believers, be responding to what's going on? So that's what I'm hoping to cover today. And to keep this short, I'm just going to dive right in. So first, let's start with the coronavirus, the disease itself. You've probably heard that there are a few different names for it: the Wuhan flu, the Chinese virus, Corona-19, COVID-19, quite a few different names for it. And they all kind of, different names have different origins. It's called the Chinese or the Wuhan flu because of its origins. It started in a city called Wuhan. And it's actually started in a meat market, I think, a live meat market, where they keep a bunch of animals. That's the origins of it, and so that's why some people call it the Wuhan flu. It comes from that city in China. But as for it being called coronavirus and COVID-19, COVID-19 just stands for corona, the CO, virus, the VI, disease, D, and then 19 because it is the 2019 novel. Sorry, my ultra sophisticated method for holding up my phone just fell. I'm just using masking tape, so very sophisticated stuff here. Coronavirus, COVID-19. It's called that, the 19 comes from 2019, that it's a new strain of this kind of virus. So you might hear people calling it a novel strain. Novel simply means it's new. It's not something out of a book or anything like that. It just means new. So as for why is it called the coronavirus, well, the Latin word corona means crown in English, and if you look at the virus under a microscope, you'll see that it has these little spikes on it, and so that's why they're calling it that. It reminds them of crowns with little spiky bits on it, I guess. I don't know. But that's kind of the origin of its name, and I guess I did touch briefly on where it came from. It came from China and the city of Wuhan. Looking at my notes here. The big deal, why is everybody freaking out about this virus? What makes it so special? Well, as you probably have heard, it's not in itself a very dangerous virus. It's not like the plague or something where you get it and it's a death sentence. No, the the death rates for most people are actually really, really low. And most of the time, your symptoms are really mild. If you have it, you can expect a fever, some coughing, some shortness of breath. It's a respiratory illness, basically. And beyond that, for most people, it's not an issue. The big deal comes from if you're an older person with health issues, or if you have some kind of pre-existing health issue like heart disease or asthma or something like that. It tends then to complicate and make those issues worse, and that's where a lot of the concern, at least with people dying, comes from. It's not the young people like my age or even your guys' age that they're concerned about dying from it. It's more the old people who already are having a hard time fighting most illnesses, or people with pre-existing conditions like heart disease or things like that. So that's the big deal as far as what does the disease do. It's just a respiratory bug. Most people will kick it with little issue, but there are some people that won't. It will be a bigger deal for them to fight it and to get over it. The other issue with the coronavirus is that it does not show right away. When you contract the coronavirus, you may not know you have it for up to 2 weeks, and that's kind of a big deal because a lot can happen in 2 weeks. I mean, think about it. 2 weeks ago, we were, the last time we met was 2 weeks ago? Yeah, it would have been 2 weeks ago. So we were still having youth group. Think about all the people and all the things you've done since the last time we've had youth group to now. I mean, that's a lot of people you can be in contact with, and you could be passing the coronavirus to without even realizing it. And that's why people are so scared of this virus. You can have it for 2 weeks and never know it, never show any symptoms that you're sick. Double checking my notes again, I know. So that's kind of the big deal. It's not that the coronavirus is deadly in itself, like Black Death or something. It's that you can have it and not know it. And while for most people it's not a big deal to get over it, for some people it can be very, very fatal. So yeah, that's why the disease has caught the attention of the media and the government and all. So now let's kind of talk through the government's response. Okay, the government is aware of this disease that could cause potential... Oh, that was the other thing with the coronavirus, guys. Not only can you have it and not know it, it's actually very contagious. From what I'm seeing, it's more contagious than the flu. In that basically if you come in contact with someone who has it, you've got a pretty solid chance of catching it yourself, of developing symptoms yourself. That was the other big thing I found when I was doing some research. That's pretty contagious. Even just being in the vicinity of someone who has it can be an issue. And by vicinity, I mean within 10 feet. And the reason that is because it's passed mainly through respiratory droplets, is what the CDC says. Basically, that means any even microscopic airborne particles that you put out when you're talking even can carry the coronavirus to someone. So if you're standing, 10 feet from someone, and 10 feet would not even be from me to the door, and you're talking to them, you can potentially give them it if you're carrying it. So that was the other big thing I found when I was researching the coronavirus. It's very contagious. You can have it for 2 weeks and be passing it without knowing it. And while it's not fatal for most, it has a tendency to be very fatal for people who have health conditions to begin with. So that explains why there's all this concern about it. Now I want to talk again about the government's response. Why is everybody freaking out? Why is the government going to such extremes to combat this illness? And that one took a little more digging for me. I had to do a little more research. As you guys know, the government has been taking incremental steps to help combat this. I mean, it started with travel bans from China and then some other countries and then most of Europe, and then all of a sudden they're saying, hey, don't get into groups of more than 250, and then it was, don't have groups of 50 or more meet, and then it's, hey, you should avoid traveling and no groups of 10 or more. Excuse me. And then it's, hey, you can't leave your house unless you absolutely need to for food or health or safety, or because you have to for work. And most work places are going to be closed except those that are absolutely necessary for people to survive, like grocery stores, gas stations, etc. You see this very rapid but incremental stepping up of what they are doing to combat this, and the big question is why. And we talked about already, why the disease is kind of scary from a government, well, just in general, that, it's so contagious, you can have it for 2 weeks, and it can be fatal to people. But that doesn't explain exactly why the government is so worried about it. And so I did some digging. And basically, the government recognizes that they can't stop the disease. That even with all these measures they're taking, people are going to get sick. And so that wasn't their primary concern. Yes, it's sad people are going to get sick, and it's bad that people are going to die from it, but at the end of the day, they recognize they can't stop that from happening. So instead, their focus is on slowing the disease. And I first heard that, and I thought, that's odd. Wouldn't it be to stop it? Well, we can't stop it. That makes sense. And then I saw this chart that the government had done. I don't know if you guys have seen it. It's a chart that looks, I should have drawn this earlier, but it's a chart that looks something like this, okay? They got this big one here and then this small one here, and they're saying that this curve here is what the virus would do on its own, and what they're hoping to do is make it look more like this. And they usually put this little, flat line right there across the top of the little curve. And I got to looking and saying, okay, why is that? Why are they trying to flatten the curve, as you may hear some people say? And it comes down to the capacity of our healthcare system. I think we've got one of the best healthcare systems in the world, but even our great healthcare system has its limits. There are so many people it can treat at one time. And the government's concern was that if this disease broke out all at once and we just had massive numbers of people coming in who are sick and, making other people sick, that the healthcare system wouldn't be able to keep up. And that's kind of what this chart is meant to show you, that if we don't flatten this one, we're going to have all these people up here who are sick but can't get treatment until the disease is basically done, and at that point it's a moot point. And so their hope is by putting all these measures into place, they can flatten the curve, they can spread out how many people are getting sick at one time. The total number of people who are going to get sick is, based on what I've seen of the curves, looks to be about the same, but it's going to be spread out in a way that they can handle it and they can help people better. Does that make sense, guys? The purpose of slowing the disease is not to eradicate it or stop it. It's to make sure that everyone gets the best care possible. If everyone gets sick at once, they can't do that. If they spread it out, it makes it so people can get the help they need. Now, the other part of spreading it out, of slowing the disease, is also the economics of it. If everybody in the workforce is suddenly sick, it's going to tank the U.S. economy. And so by spreading it out, it hurts for a little longer, but the overall damage is less. I know economics probably isn't something most of you guys are interested in. It's something I enjoy just because I like numbers and I'm a nerdy like that. But it is important to understand that if the U.S. economy goes in, if it tanks, if it flounders, if it dies, it's going to hurt everyone globally. The U.S. is one of the biggest economies. I think it is the biggest economy in the world. except for maybe China, but when they got 3 billion people on you. Anyway, so the hope with flattening the curve, slowing the spread is, yes, it's going to last a little longer, but it's not going to be as severe. And a smaller hit, even though it's sustained, is better than a large hit over a short time. It's easier to recover from a smaller hit, even if it's prolonged, than a large hit. So I think that's the biggest thing that the government is trying to do with all this. Their response is based around, okay, recognizing that they can't just stop the disease. We don't have a vaccine. Now, I think part of their hope is that a vaccine will be developed in time for the tail end of this, that, a couple months down the road as the disease is still in effect. And not that I think we're going to be in quarantine this long or whatever, but I think their hope is that after we get through the worst of it, they'll have a vaccine to help start eradicating it near the end. But all that to say, I think the government's response is to the purpose of slowing the disease, because they recognize they can't stop it at this point in time, and then also trying to minimize the damage to the economy, but also, and I think most importantly, trying to make sure that people can get the best care possible. I genuinely think that is why the government is responding the way they are. I hope that all makes sense. If it doesn't, guys, just let me know in the comments. I'll try to read them over the next few hours and respond as I am able. But that's why the government, I think, is responding the way they are. Now, how do we respond? That's the big question. And for that, guys, I'd point you to Romans 13, 1 through 7. And if you got your Bibles near you, go ahead and pull them open and open up to Romans 13, 1 through 7. I'll read that passage to you. It says, "Let every soul be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and the authorities that exist are appointed by God. Therefore, whoever resists the authority resists the ordinance of God, and those who resist will bring judgment on themselves. For rulers are not a terror to good works, but to evil. Do you want to be unafraid of the authority? Do what is good, and you will have praise from the same. For he is God's minister to you for good. But if you do evil, be afraid, for he does not bear the sword in vain. For he is God's minister, an avenger to execute wrath on him who practices evil. Therefore you must be subject, not only because of wrath, but because also of conscience sake. For because of this you also pay taxes, for they are God's ministers, attending continually to this very thing. Render therefore to all their due, taxes to whom taxes are due, customs to whom customs are due, fear to whom fear is due, and honor to whom honor is due." Guys, this is a very important passage for understanding how we as Christians need to interact with our government. And basically it boils down to governments are put into authority by God's design. There is no government that exists that is not existing outside of God's will. Does that make sense? Doesn't mean that God approves of everything every government does. A lot of people will immediately say, well, what about the Nazis in World War II? Well, clearly, God doesn't approve of what they did. And I think God used them for some purpose, although that is a discussion for another time. All governments, guys, are appointed by God. And for us to disregard, to disobey, would be the same as disobeying God. Now, there are exceptions in other places in the Bible, which I'm not going to take time to work through, mainly because this has been a 20-minute video. But there are other places where the Bible shows clearly, if a government or authority asks you to do something that is clearly against Scripture, don't do it. But in this case, what they're asking us to do is not against Scripture. In fact, it's a very loving thing to do. They're asking us to stay home, even though it's inconvenient to us, for the health and safety of others. Guys, like I said, you can have this disease and not even know it. You can be spreading it and not even knowing it. And that's what the government is concerned about. They don't want you going around spreading it to people who can't handle it. So the biblical response, guys, is to obey. Is to stay home and just make the best of the situation the best you can. I know it's not convenient. I know it's not fun. I'm day one of being home and I'm already going a little stir crazy. I'm having to find things to do to help occupy my time, because I get it. You get bored being in the same place for an extended period of time. We're going to be at home for the most part for the next 2 weeks, except when you're going to the store or something. It's going to be hard. But at the same time, we need to recognize, guys, that God has appointed these governments over us for our better, to rule over us, to be God's ministers to us, to help protect us. So all that saying, I think the biblical response, guys, is to hunker down, obey the mandate that our governor has placed over us to stay home unless we need to go out for specific things. But for the most part, do our part to slow the spread, to help people get the best care they can. Alright? Hey, I hope all this makes sense. Just to kind of recap, again, the coronavirus itself isn't something that most of us need to be worried about. The people who need to be worried are the people who are older and have failing immune systems or have a pre-existing condition. And I know that's not most of you guys, but we can carry it without even knowing it, and that's the scary part. We can give it to people we love, grandparents or loved ones who are sick with other things, and not even know it. So we need to do our part, obey the government, and just hunkering down and staying put to help them make sure that everyone can get the best care possible. I think that's all I got to say. I know this probably wasn't the most professional videos. Maybe tomorrow's will be a little more professional or something, but we'll kind of see. But thanks for listening. If you stuck around this long, I know I kind of rambled at times or lost my place. It's really weird to be in a room by yourself talking to your phone. It just feels weird, especially when there's not someone else on the other end of the line. So, hey, take care, guys. I'll see you tomorrow. I'm going to post a video tomorrow talking through the book of Esther to kind of wrap up the Old Testament, and the week after then we'll be moving into the New Testament. So that's kind of the rough plan for the next couple of weeks. We'll probably just do videos on YouTube that I'll link into Facebook, but yeah, I think that's all I got. Stay safe, guys. I'm trying to contact and just Facebook message people and just try to touch base and make sure you're all okay, but until I see you again, keep on keeping on, I guess. I don't know. Take care, guys. Bye.